Good morning. We're on Daf Tzadi Hey Amud Beis 95b in the middle of the Daf. Rabbi Gamliel Mishnayim Shnayim. In the Mishnah, we saw that if somebody finds tefillin outside of a space that he's allowed to carry, so he puts them on and wears them for and the question is why, according to the Tana Kama, the first opinion in the Mishnah, you only wear one pair of tefillin at a time, and Rabbi Gamliel says you can put on two pair at a time. Rabbi Gamliel Mishnayim Shnayim. My kasavar. What is Rabbi Gamliel's opinion? Ikasavar that he says you can put on two. Ikasavar Shabbos man tefillin. If the basis of his reasoning is because Shabbos is a time for tefillin, even though that we do not wear tefillin on Shabbos, but the Rabbi Gamliel's opinion would be that you are allowed to, and not only allowed to, but obligated in wearing tefillin on Shabbos. And as such, since you wear it for the mitzvah, so you can wear multiple pair in order to save it. Zugechad in tefillin, so then you should only be allowed to wear one pair, because if you wear a second pair of tefillin while you do so, you're over on Baal Tosef. You're transgressing Baal Tosef because you are adding to a mitzvah. We know that the Torah says do not add and do not take away from a mitzvah. And the meaning of that is that you can't do a mitzvah in a manner that you're adding to the obligation of the mitzvah in its function. So you can't have two mezuzahs on a doorpost. That would be Baal Tosef. You cannot put fringes on or tzitzis on five corners of a garment. So you can't wear two pair of tefillin.
According to Rabbi Gamliel, so what's the connection between saying that Shabbos is Zman Tefillin and being able to then, since I hold that Shabbos is Zman Tefillin, then I could wear two pairs? What's the connection between the two?
No, the Gemara is saying that's why you should only be allowed to wear one.
But why did he say two then?
That's the Gemara's question. Well, the Gemara is trying to figure that out. Why did he say two? Does he hold Shabbos as a time at tefillin, then only one should be allowed, because you have a mitzvah and you do more than that, you're transgressing Baal Tosef.
Oh.
Right? And ikus of our Shabbos lavs man tefillin. And if you tell me Shabbos is not a time for tefillin, so therefore there's no mitzvah. So if there's no mitzvah, so I'm not doing it as a mitzvah. I'm wearing it as just as an ornamental tiara, right? I'm just wearing something on my head. Right. And therefore, since I'm trying to save it, anything that's like a garment that I'm wearing is permissible. So if that's the case, so then let him wear more than two pair of tefillin. Why two? So either one, because it's a mitzvah and you're not allowed to add to it, or you can wear as many as you can fit, or many as you want. So the Gemara says, you're right. His opinion is that Shabbos is not an obligation of tefillin, and it's not a time for tefillin, and therefore you don't have you're not going to be wearing tefillin as a mitzvah. And the Rabbanan allowed it to be worn in order to save the tefillin, but however it has to be derech malbush, only if you wear it in a manner that it's a garment. The makom tefillin, wherever the tefillin normally would be, that's a garment. If you wear a tefillin on your shoulder or the back of your head, that can't be considered a garment. So then you back to question number one. So then we should be wearing one. There is place on the head where the correct space for tefillin is to put two pair of tefillin. And as we'll see soon, that's from the beginning of the hairline where it naturally is to, as the Gemara calls it, the soft spot of a baby, meaning where the bones of the skull fuse, and there's a soft spot for a baby in the middle of the head. So that's where the place for tefillin is. And so you can fit 2 pair there, but you can't fit more. And that's why he says you could take 2 pair, because it's not a mitzvah time. So therefore, there's no transgression of wearing more than one. And but you can only wear it in a way that is a typical manner to wear it. So you can fit 2 max. So Gemara says, okay, hanicha derush. That means there's enough place for 2 on the head. But the yad ma'iklamema, what do you do about the arm tefillin? Kederav Huna, like Rav Huna, Damar Rav Huna, Pa'amim Shadabam and Asada v'Chavilasa al-Rishit. Sometimes a person comes in from the fields and they have their basket on their head. They have their package on their head. So they're not going to want to wear tefillin when they do that. Umasalka Marosha, so he's going to have to remove it before he puts the package on his head. He's going to remove the tefillin from his head and the kosher b'srayim, and he's going to put it onto his arm. So you see the 2 tefillin on the arm. And Rav says, Rav Huna, of course, Rav Huna said that, but only in a case so that the tefillin not be damaged or it be disgraceful the way he treats his tefillin when he puts a package on top of it. But did he say that that's an appropriate way of wearing tefillin? That you could say that this is considered a garment? The concept the Gemara here is dealing with is that when something is worn in a manner that it is typically worn, that's a garment. But if something's worn in an abnormal way, then you're carrying it as a package. And so even though the tefillin sometimes can be, in order for its protection and for its dignity, you move the tefillin as a second piece of tefillin onto your arm. That's not a manner of wearing the tefillin. That's a manner of protecting the tefillin, and that would be considered carrying on Shabbos. Ella kedamar of Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Rather, like Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak said, elaborating on the original statement, just as he said that there's a place for 2 tefillin on the head. Makim yesh b'rosh aroy lo nich b'shtei tefillin. Hachanami, so too. Makim yesh b'yad sharoy lo nich b'shtei tefillin. This place on the forearm as well. Sorry, on the upper arm, on the bicep as well, to place 2 pair of tefillin. And so it's considered wearing it and not carrying it. Tanat ve Menashe. So in the Academy of Menashe, they taught al yadecha. It says by tefillin should be on your arms. Zukiburis, that's the bicep. Bein einecha, it says between your eyes. Zekad kot, that's the top of the head. Heicha, where is this? Amrid ve Rav Yana, in the Academy of Rav Yana, it said makam shemecha shel tinok rufis. The place up to the place where the child's where a infant's head is soft. So the proper place of tefillin is not on the forehead; it's on the above your hairline, back to the soft spot in the head. That's the space. Anywhere between there is a proper space for tefillin. So now the Gemara is going to go, okay, so we had the first opinion said you can only wear, in the Mishnah, that you can only wear 1 pair of tefillin as you're saving it, and go in and then go back and get another. And Rabbi Gamliel says 2. So what's the basis of this machlokas? So let's say the basis of machlokas is whether or not there's truly space for 2 pair of tefillin there or not. And therefore, according to Rabbi Gamliel, he says that it counts as a typical way of wearing it, and it's a garment and you're not carrying it. And the first opinion says no, there's only place for 1 pair of tefillin. So if you put on a second, you're actually carrying a package because that's not a typical way of wearing it. The Tanakama, Leslie the Rav Shmuel Rav Yitzchak. The Tanakama says there's no place for 2. Rabbi Gamliel is later Rav Shmuel Rav Yitzchak. Rabbi Gamliel, it does concur with Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yitzchak. He's earlier, meaning with Rabbi Shmuel, his opinion is in concurrence with that opinion, and therefore it's a manner of wearing, and you can take even 2 pair. Everybody agrees it's place for 2 pair of tefillin. Rather, the basis is Is Shabbos a time for tefillin or not? The Tanakama Savar Zman Tefillin who. The first opinion says there is an obligation on Shabbos to wear tefillin just like on the weekday, and as we'll see the discussion in the next daf about this machlokas. And therefore, since it's a time for tefillin as well, and if he's going to wear a second pair, he's going to transgress Baal Tosef, adding to a mitzvah, and therefore he can only wear one pair of tefillin. Rabbi Gamliel Savar Shabbos allows man tefillin, and Rabbi Gamliel says no, there's no obligation of Shabbos of wearing tefillin, and therefore you're just wearing it as a garment, and if you're wearing it as a garment, as a tachshit, as an adornment, so you can wear two of them as long as because there's no mitzvah. Or perhaps the way we could say this, no, the Kollel Alma Shabbos man tefillin. Rabbi Gamliel would also admit that Shabbos is a time for tefillin, and yet he would say that there's no problem. The question is, do you need intent when doing a mitzvah, or do you not need intent? Do we say mitzvah tzrichas kavana? A mitzvah requires intent, and therefore the first opinion says, since you require intent, so when you put on the tefillin, you have to intend that you're doing you're doing a mitzvah. So you're putting on the second pair. You're specifically intending that this is a mitzvah. And if you intend for a mitzvah, you're adding to the mitzvah by wearing two. And if you don't intend for the mitzvah, so you haven't done the mitzvah, so you're just carrying it. So by definition, you have to intend that you're doing a mitzvah, and since you're intending you're doing a mitzvah, if you put a second pair on, you're going to transgress. And if you don't intend, so then you're carrying. But Tanakama Savar, the first opinion says, Lot says by kavana. In order to fulfill the mitzvah, you need to intend that you're doing the mitzvah, and if you intend, then you're adding you're adding to the mitzvah by wearing a second pair. And Rabbi Gamliel says, no, you do not require intent. So you could just put it on. You could put it on, and you wear it. One as a mitzvah, and the other one I'm not wearing as a mitzvah, and there's no Baal Tosef. Because you're only going to transgress Baal Tosef, adding to a mitzvah, if I add it with the intent of it being a mitzvah. If I'm adding something without intent being a mitzvah, then it wouldn't count as a mitzvah. Rashi over here, that's the first interpretation of Rashi. Rashi has a different version as well. We're going to go with this one. Now on Sadi Vav Aleph, the Iba Yisema, or perhaps the Kuli Alme Lotzis Labay Kavana. Everybody is going to say that no, you can fulfill the mitzvah by just putting it on. You don't need specific intent. As soon as you put it on, you fulfill the mitzvah. However, the question is, do you need intent in order to transgress the prohibition of wearing extra, of doing more than the mitzvah? The Tanakama Savar, la'avar mishum Baal Tosef, le'bei kavana. In order to transgress Baal Tosef, you do not need intent. And therefore, even though that the mitzvah you can transgress, just as the mitzvah you can fulfill without intent. So you put on tefillin, you did it. So too, when you put on the second pair, you're going to transgress Baal Tosef, because you even though you didn't intend specifically for the mitzvah, but you're doing the mitzvah and you're doing more than the mitzvah prescribed. And Rabbi Gamliel says, no, you're only going to transgress Baal Tosef, adding to a mitzvah, if you specifically intended that I'm doing this as the mitzvah. And over here, I'm not. I'm intending for the mitzvah. I'm intending to save it. So I'm going to fulfill the mitzvah of the one pair, and the second pair, there's no specific intent for mitzvah, and so I'm not going to transgress Baal Tosef, and so I'm allowed to wear a second. Now the Gemara is going to go the other way entirely. And you're going to say, actually, if they hold that it's a mitzvah, it's a problem. Anybody say me either svir on Shabbos man tefillin do kulam loy laver by kavana by lotzes by kavana. If you say Shabbos is a time of mitzvah, everybody agrees you don't need intent to fulfill the mitzvah. You don't need intent to transgress, and you couldn't wear a second pair because you're going to transgress Baal Tosef. But rather, right now the time is not for tefillin, and everybody's going to agree that Shabbos is not the time for tefillin. However, the question is, when it's not the time for tefillin, and I intend for a mitzvah, do I transgress Baal Tosef adding to the mitzvah or not? Tanakama savar lo b'y kavana. Tanakama says, even though it's not the time for the mitzvah, if I'm doing the mitzvah, even without intent, that's a transgression. And so wearing tefillin on Shabbos, which is not the time, I can wear one pair. I wear a second pair, I've transgressed. And Rabbi Gamliel says, no, it's not the time for the mitzvah. So if you're not intending for the mitzvah, and it's not the time for the mitzvah, it's nothing. And therefore, you have there's no hint of the mitzvah here by wearing tefillin on a non-tefillin day. And so a second pair also is not going to be in addition. Because there's no intent, unless you specifically intend that I'm wearing it for the mitzvah, then you've had a transgression. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Meir, zug echad namila. So if you're adding to the mitzvah, even without intent, that's considered adding. So Rabbi Gamliel makes sense. He says, even though it's not the day for the mitzvah, unless I intend, I didn't transgress. So I can wear one pair because that's not a transgression. I can wear two pair because that's not a transgression, and two pair maximum because that's what fits on my head, and I'm not carrying, and that counts as wearing it. However, according to the first opinion, the Tanakama, which the Gemara here calls Rabbi Meir because it's an unattributed Mishnah, is generally Rabbi Meir. The question is, if it's not the time for tefillin, and I'm wearing tefillin, it's not a day that I'm supposed to wear tefillin. And according to the Tanakama, even without intent, I'm going to transgress adding to the mitzvah. Well, then I've added to the mitzvah because the mitzvah says wear tefillin Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And you're wearing tefillin Shabbos. So you're adding to the mitzvah and you transgress adding to the mitzvah, even without intent. Similarly, you look at, and John's asking if you're just wearing it in order to save it and bring it in, why does it count? That's the idea is that this opinion says that when you do a mitzvah, even without intent, it counts as a mitzvah. And therefore, if you do a second one, you're transgressing, adding to a mitzvah, even though that's not what your intent is, but mitzvahs and nitzrichas kavana. This is going to go with the opinion that mitzvahs do not require intent. And if you say the mitzvah requires intent, that was the other version, that either this counts as intent because you're putting it on for the mitzvah in order to be able to carry it, because otherwise you could just carry it in your hand. No, the reason you're carrying it on your head is because that's the way to wear it as a mitzvah. So we had various versions of what the reason would be of that this would count as transgression. But somewhere in this version that we're looking right now is, since Shabbos is not the time for tefillin, but you transgress adding to the mitzvah even if you're not intending for the mitzvah. So if that's the case, the Gemara is saying even just wearing it should be a transgression of adding to a mitzvah, even though, as you're saying, John, he's only bringing it in order to save it. However, but he's putting it on his head, and that's a fulfillment of the mitzvah, and you don't need intent to fulfill it, and you don't need intent either to transgress Baal Tosef adding to the mitzvah, and he's adding by wearing tefillin on a day that the Torah didn't obligate. The Torah said wear it for these 6 days, and you're wearing it on the 7th. And similarly, somebody who sleeps in the sukkah on the 8th day of Sukkot, on Shmini Atzeres, where there no longer is an obligation of sleeping in the sukkah or eating in the sukkah. And we do eat in the sukkah on the 8th day on account of that it's the seventh day, because outside of Eretz Yisrael, we do 2 days of Yantiv. And so the 7th day of Yantiv, which we're obligated in sitting in the sukkah, has 2 days as well. So that's the 8th day. But 8th day is an independent Yantiv as well. So the Gemara tells us in Sukkah that we sit in a Sukkah, but we don't say the bracha of Leishiv Basukah. We don't say the bracha of Leishiv Basukah because it's also the 8th day. And we're making Kiddush for Shmini Atzeres. But we do sit in the Sukkah because it's the Sveika Diyama, the additional day, the second day of the 7th day. But how can you do that? If you say you need to intend for a mitzvah in order to transgress the mitzvah, so by us not saying the bracha, we're showing that we're actually not intending for it to be a mitzvah if today is the 8th day. We're only intending to do it because maybe today is the 7th day.
Well, on Rosh Hashanah,
one second.
Yeah.
So therefore, there's there's no Baal Tosif because you have to intend to transgress, to do the mitzvah. And we're clearly saying we're not intending to do the mitzvah because if today's the 8th day. That's why we're not saying the bracha. However, according to the first opinion, that says that in order to transgress Baal Tosif, you don't have to intend to do the mitzvah. You're just doing the mitzvah even without intent on a day beyond the mitzvah. That transgression happens automatically. So who cares if you're not saying the bracha and you're indicating that you may not be doing it for a mitzvah because you're not sure if today's the 7th day of Sukkot or the 8th day. So you're sitting in the sukkah because maybe it's the 7th day. Who cares if you said the bracha or not, if you intend or not? According to Rabbi Meir, you're saying that you transgress Baal Tosif even without intent.
So it seems to me that that shofar, Rosh Hashanah falls on first day of Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos. Nobody says there's no mitzvah of shofar on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. It's Shabbos. We don't blow shofar on Shabbos because Shema Yavirenu. But it's still it's still a mitzvah to blow the shofar on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, even if it's on Shabbos. It's the mitzvah is to blow the shofar. We don't do it. Why is this any different?
Why is what different?
I'm saying the mitzvah is to wear tefillin every day.
No.
We don't wear on Shabbos.
No. Where'd you get that from?
I'm asking, what's the difference between shofar and Rosh Hashanah? Nobody says there's no mitzvah.
No. You're mixing up two things. There's no reason. The reason for not wearing tefillin on Shabbos is
an ois.
Is what?
It's an ois.
Right. It has nothing to do with maybe you're gonna carry it. There actually is no mitzvah. On Rosh Hashanah, there's a mitzvah to blow shofar, but on Shabbos, we don't blow shofar because somebody's going to carry it in the public domain, carry the shofar to shul, and so therefore, Chazal said, don't blow shofar. But that's not the reason for tefillin. Tefillin, the opinion that says that Shabbos is not a time for tefillin says it's not a time for tefillin because the Torah didn't obligate for tefillin on Shabbos. We'll see in a moment. It actually is not an obligation. And so if you do it, you're going to transgress. If you do it as an obligation, you're transgressing, adding to the mitzvah.
Can I just jump ahead? Didn't you once tell me that the maskana, it is a mitzvah on Shabbos? It's just we don't wear it on Shabbos? That if a person wore it says in halacha.
At nighttime, you're remembering something else. At nighttime, we paskin tefillin is an obligation at night. Only we don't wear it because you may fall asleep in it.
No, I'm talking about on Shabbos. If you wore tefillin on Shabbos, not for the mitzvah, you had no intention. I'm not wearing for mitzvah. I just like wearing tefillin on Shabbos. The only reason we don't do it is because someone's going to see it. Someone's going to see it and emulate you. But Lemaisa, if you wanted to wear tefillin on Shabbos, not for the mitzvah, what's the problem?
Right, but that means it's not a mitzvah. Shabbos and shofar are two different things. A tefillin and shofar are two different things. Shofar on Shabbos is an obligation that we don't do. Tefillin on Shabbos is not an obligation.
Not an obligation. But still, if you wore it, not for
Well,
the not.
That's
not
what we're
because
seeing here. If you wear it now, it's just a tachshit. It's just a garment, an adornment on your head. You're wearing a black leather tiara.
So then we're four of them. What's the problem?
They don't fit. Only two wear. Only two
Why?
fit.
No, but I mean, the minute it's a top sheet, I can wear it anywhere I want.
No, that's not the way it's worn. You're wearing a tiara on your shoulder. That doesn't. Then you're carrying it. You're not wearing it.
I got it. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Ella. So Gemara says Ella machvarta. So you're right. We're going to have to say that the first opinion at least holds that there is an obligation of tefillin on Shabbos. Ella machvarta k'mashina meikara. Like we said earlier, that at least the first opinion is going to hold Shabbos is the proper time for tefillin. Uman Shabbos le Shabbos man tefillin. So whose opinion is this? That Shabbos is an obligation, even on Shabbos is an obligation of tefillin. Rabbi Akiva. This is going to be the first version. The Gemara is going to assume it's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. The Tani we learned. In the parsha of Korban Pesach and the parsha of Kaddish Likal B'chor, which is one of the four parshas that are in the tefillin, and it says over there the parsha of sanctifying the firstborn and wearing tefillin and remembering Yitzias Mitzrayim. So there it says v'shamarta sachukazo. So you will guard this statute l'ma'ada for its time miyamim yamima, from days. Yamim v'lo leilos. It says days, but not nights. Miyamim, of days, v'lo kol yamim, but not all days. Prat l'Shabbos is v'yamim tovim, that exempts Shabbos and Yontif, because Shabbos and Yontif are not all the days. Shabbos and Yontif are excluded as not time for tefillin. Divrei Rabbi Yossi Aglili. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that the exemption of that the obligation of Shabbos, the obligation of tefillin excludes nighttime and excludes Shabbos and Yontif. However, Rabbi Kiva Eimer le'nemach hu kazu elo le'nyan Pesach bevad. Rabbi Kiva disagrees and says, no, this statement of you shall guard this statute for its time on days, that's not talking about the tefillin. There are multiple things mentioned in this section, in this parsha in the Torah. And it's not talking about this part that you shall guard it on days. It's not talking about the tefillin aspect. It's talking about the Korban Pesach aspect, the mitzvah of Pesach. And that what it says is miyamim yamima. It means from days to days, once a year, you're going to keep the mitzvah of Pesach. Well, if that's the case, why do we learn elsewhere that there are two positive mitzvahs that are kares, Pesach and Milah, the Korban Pesach and the Bris? Lema don't like Rabbi Akiva. We're going to have to say not like Rabbi Akiva, because we know as a general rule, whenever the Torah says v'shamarta, you will guard it, that's a negative prohibition. The Rabbi Akiva, Akiva the Ma'ikila b'Pesach, lavnami yika. If you say that this is talking about Pesach, there's going to be a negative commandment. The Rabbi Avin, like Rabbi Avin said in the name of Rabbi Lai, Amar Rabbi Lai, Damar Rabbi Avin, Amar Rabbi Lai, Kamakam Shanema, he's Shamer. Anytime it says you shall guard it, that means protect it, don't transgress. Pen, lest you will, so that's also a transgression. But al, if it says and you shall not, Eina Ella Beloisa, say all of these are a negative commandment. So over here you have a negative commandment, a prohibition on Pesach as well. Why are you telling me that it's only Pesach is a positive commandment? Afilotema Rabbi Akiva. We can say it's Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva says that's true. He shamer de lav. If when the Torah says guard and it says a prohibition, it means a prohibition. He shamer the asay when it says guard, a positive commandment, it's an asay, a positive commandment. So Rabbi Akiva says that over here the he shamer v'shamarta sachuka azos, you will guard this. It's talking about the Pesach once a year. Now the Gemara says, is that okay? So you're telling me Rabbi Akiva must be the one, since he doesn't learn that verse is referring to Korban Pesach, referring to Tefillin, it's referring to Pesach. So therefore, he's the one that says that Shabbos is not the time for Tefillin. V'savar Rabbi Akiva Shabbos man Tefillin. Shabbos is the time for tefillin. Is that really true? Rabbi Kiva, Shabbos man tefillin. But time we learned. Rabbi Kiva Omer, perhaps a person you'd think would wear tefillin on Shabbos and Yontif. So therefore it says it shall be for you as a sign on your forearm, on your arm. So it has to be on days that require a sign. Which excludes these days, Shabbos and Yontif. They themselves are a sign on account of that. There's a prohibition on those days, so they themselves because Hashem says that Shabbos is a sign between Hashem and the Jewish people, and therefore Shabbos itself is a sign, so you don't need the tefillin as a sign. So we have two verses here. Rabbi Yossi Aglili has the verse of Miyamim Yamima, some days require tefillin, some don't. Rabbi Kiva says that's not the basis. But where Rabbi Kiva says a different source for Shabbos not wearing tefillin, and that's that it shall be a sign, and only a day that requires a sign has a sign. So rather, it's the opinion of this Tana. The Tani would learn Taner Balayla, somebody who's awake at night. Ratza Choylitz. So if he plans on being up at night, he can wear his tefillin. So if he wants, he can take off his tefillin. Ratza Meniach, if he wants, he can keep his tefillin on. Divrei Rabbi Nosson. That's what Rabbi Nosson says. Yonasan Hakituni Omer, Ein Menichet Tefillin Balayla. And Yonasan Hakituni says you cannot wear tefillin at night. Now, Medalayla Latana Kama is man tefillin. And since the first opinion, Rabbi Nosson says that nighttime is a time for tefillin, Shabbos Nami is man tefillin. Shabbos must also be a time for tefillin, because as Rabbi Yossi Aglili explained, mi yamim, yamima, yamim daytime, a yamima a weekday, not Shabbos. So we see they go together. And if you tell me that the nighttime is time for tefillin, then Shabbos is also time for tefillin. So the Gemara says, who tells you? Dil Mesfile Laila is man tefillin. Maybe he follows the opinion of Rabbi Akiva that says that there's an exemption of Shabbos because it's a sign, a symbol, ois, but not nighttime. Nighttime is a time for tefillin, but Shabbos allows man tefillin. Dashmina Rabbi Akiva, like Rabbi Akiva said, Amalayla is man tefillin, because Rabbi Akiva says that nighttime is a time for tefillin. Shabbos allows man tefillin, and Shabbos is not a time for tefillin. Ela haitanu. So rather, it's the opinion of this teaching. The Tani we learned Michal Bas Kushi, Michal, the daughter of Shaul HaMelech, King Shaul, she would put on tefillin, and the Chachamim did not tell her to stop. It did not tell her that it's the wrong thing to do. Rashi says, and why would they have told her it's the wrong thing to do? Because she's adding to a mitzvah, because she's exempt, because it's a time-bound mitzvah. If Shabbos is not the time for tefillin, so it's a time-bound mitzvah, and women are exempt of a time-bound mitzvah, and the Chachamim would have told her, don't do it. Tessa says, why? As we'll see, many time-bound mitzvahs women are not obligated to doing, but they may do them, and in fact, they do them. And not only that, Tessa proves from here and elsewhere that they make a bracha when they do and fulfill the mitzvah when they do it. So why would the Chachamim tell her not to do it if it's not a mitzvah? Rather, and this really is relevant to us as well, nowadays, even though you can see throughout this sugya that really the obligation is to wear tefillin the entire day. And really at night, only we're afraid we're going to fall asleep in it. But since tefillin sarich guf naki, you need to have constant intent on tefillin and keep the body clean. Can't pass gas and many other obligations in tefillin in keeping the body clean. And so therefore, the obligation, once somebody fulfills the obligation, the encouragement is don't put it on or don't continue to wear it because you may not maintain the proper the proper intent and proper dignity of the tefillin. And so if somebody's not obligated in tefillin, meaning they already wore it for Shachris, we tell them don't wear it for the rest of the day anymore. And for women, we say don't wear tefillin because you're not going to be able to maintain, or you may not be able to maintain the proper tefillin. So tefillin, although many mitzvahs that you're not obligated in, you can still do, tefillin is one of those, if you're not obligated, the Chachamim should have told her not to do it. Similarly, the Brisa says, Ishta Shal Yonah, the wife of Yonah, she would do Aliyah L'Regel, go up to the pilgrimage for Yantiv. The Chachamim didn't tell her not to. And there too, there was a question of bringing a korban, so there's a reason not to come in because she may do a korban that's not obligated. Now, since the Chachamim didn't stop her, they you see that it must be an obligation for her to wear tefillin, and it's not a time-bound mitzvah, meaning that even on Shabbos and Yantiv there's an obligation. So Gemara says, no, that's not proof either. Dilma, perhaps, Savala Rabbi Yossi Dama Nashim Semches Rishus. Now we're on Sadi Vav on base 96b. Maybe they follow the opinion of Rabbi Yossi that says that women are allowed to do smicha, even though that they're not obligated in leaning on the animal and in the korban that they bring, but they're allowed to if they want to. The Iloi Teimachi, because if you don't say that, Ishashol Yona Haisa Ila Larega Valamichaba. What about the wife of Yonah who brought a korban and nobody said to her, and nobody said anything to her? So the Gemara says, everybody agrees that Aliyah L'Regel is a time-bound mitzvah, going up the pilgrimage, a time-bound mitzvah, and yet they did not stop her from going. So you see, there's no issue with going up and doing a mitzvah, even though you're not obligated. Rather, even though it was not an obligation, she did it, and she did it well, so they didn't stop her. So too here, for tefillin. Michal was not stopped because she knew how to do it right. Rather, it's this opinion. The Tani we learned tefillin machnisan zug. In our like our Mishnah, the Brisa says somebody finds tefillin, he brings two pair in at a time. Echad ish, the echad isha. Echad chadashes, ve'echad yeshanas. Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, who's going to bring in this tefillin? Wear tefillin when you find it and bring it in. A man, a woman, new tefillin, old tefillin, no difference. So you see that from the fact that he says that they can bring in one pair at a time, that he's doing it as a mitzvah, and he says both a man and a woman would do this. So this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir that it's not a time-bound mitzvah and women are obligated. Rabbi Yehuda says you can't use new ones because maybe they were made they were not made as tefillin, they were made as a amulet. Umate b'yeshanas already allows old ones. Ad kan lepligi ela b'chadash v'yeshanas, and the machlek is only by new tefillin whether we consider them an amulet or concern them. Maybe they were made for tefillin v'yeshanas or old tefillin. You see that they were made properly. But Rabbi Yehuda is not disagreeing with Rabbi Meir, and he agrees that even a woman can wear the tefillin in. So you see that he considers it a non-time-bound mitzvah, a permanent mitzvah. So therefore, men and women are equally obligated. Women also have this obligation, not only men. How do you know? Maybe he follows the opinion of Rabbi Yossi that even though they're not obligated, women are not obligated, but women are permitted to wear it. And the Amar Nashim Saimchais Rishus, just like they can do smicha, which is leading on the animal to Rishus out without a obligation, still they can do so. So Gemara says, no, that doesn't seem like the meaning of Rabbi Meir's opinion. Both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda do not follow the opinion of Rabbi Yossi that if it's non-obligatory, that we're just going to allow people to do it. How do we know that Rabbi Meir does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Yossi? The Tanan we learned. We don't stop children from blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah without any, even though the mitzvah has already been fulfilled. Why? Because they need to learn how to do the mitzvah. Ha-nashim ma'akvin, which we infer that we do stop women if they want to blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah. And even though that there's, even though it's not a Torah prohibition of blowing shofar, it's not you're not doing a malacha. Nevertheless, we tell them not to blow because it's like you're adding to a mitzvah. Since it's not a mitzvah for women, it's a time-bound mitzvah. Masni to Rabbi Meir, and that Mishnah must be Rabbi Meir because it's an unattributed Mishnah, which usually is Rabbi Meir. Also, will Rabbi Yehuda someone like Rabbi Yossi? And also, Rabbi Yehuda does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Yossi that even if someone is not obligated, they're allowed to do the mitzvah. The Tanya we learned, Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'samach. In regards to leaning on the carbon and bringing carbon and doing smicha, it says in the Torah, speak to Bnei Yisrael, they should do smicha. Bnei Yisrael somchin. The Brisa says that we learn from here that males would do smicha, and females do not do smicha. To which Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon Aimerim, nashim samchas ushus. Even though there is no obligation, but they're allowed to, and they could do smicha. And now this brisa, this non-mishnah, is from where? It's from the Sifra, and Stam Sifra, which is the halachic midrash on Sefer Vayikra, Mani Rabbi Yehudi. This is the opinion. Usually, unattributed Sifra is Rabbi Yehuda. And therefore, we see that they both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda do not say that you can do a mitzvah if you're not obligated. And therefore, from the fact that Rabbi Meir said, and Rabbi Yehuda didn't disagree with that if somebody finds tefillin, regardless of whether it's male or female, they can wear the tefillin into town to save it. So you see that the obligation of tefillin, according to Rabbi Meir, is both on male and female. And therefore we see that in order for that to make sense, it has to be that it's a non-time-bound mitzvah. So we see that Rabbi Meir holds that tefillin is a